All right, I'll take this as a cue to start then. As Todd said, my name is Deb Wilson, and I'm the Commissioner of Officials for USA Triathlon. So in this role, I interpret and enforce the USA Triathlon competitive rules. I supervise a nationwide network of regional officials, coordinators, and officials so that we can staff sanctioned races properly with USAT certified officials who meet our standards and professionalism and knowledge of our competitive rules and our officials' processes. So we wanted to talk about the value of officials. So as we consider how officials bring value to race day, I thought it would be helpful to look at the foundation of our sport and officials program, which would be the rules and in turn the enforcement of those rules. So the first component is the competitive rules, which establish the expectations of sportsmanlike behavior and what is and is not allowed during competition. The second component is knowing and understanding those rules, and that encompasses the athlete and the officials. And the third part is the athletes abiding by the rules and officials enforcing the rules in a consistent manner. So why do we have rules? Well, competitive rules exist for the good of any sport, and triathlon is no different. Rules are not designed to take the fun out of our sport, but to actually enhance the race day experience of the vast majority of our athletes who seek to compete fairly. Rules are intended to promote and maintain sportsmanship, equal opportunity, fair play, and the integrity of our sport. So why should we enforce those rules? The field of play is governed not only by the rules of competition, but also by a code of conduct established by the USA Triathlon competitive rules. The athletes are our customers, and the consistent feedback we receive from our athletes is that they want the rules enforced. So through a consistent application of the competitive rules, we can best create a positive customer experience for our athletes. The rules are in place to promote and support fair competition for athletes, and enforcing the rules provides a level of playing field for all competitors and maintains the integrity of competition. The presence of officials at a race, especially pre-race, is critical for creating a positive experience for everyone. All participants and athletes enjoy a significant advantage and are more likely to experience a fair and fun race when officials are present and actively engaging in open and proactive communication with the athletes. All sports come with certain responsibilities, and the enforcement process is an integral part of that process to ensure the integrity and fair play among our participants. And establishing and following these rules honors our sport and safeguards it for future generations. So when it comes to rules and enforcement, where are the responsibilities? So officiating really is a partnership. It's a partnership with the athletes, the race directors, and the officials. We all play a part. And this partnership is most effective when athletes, race directors, and officials work together to ensure a smooth event. So by registering for a USAT sanctioned event and subsequently signing the USAT waiver, athletes are required to abide by the competitive rules. And it's the athlete's responsibility to not only know the rules, but seek clarification when they have questions about the rules and observe the rules in competition. When athletes know the rules and have a clear expectation, they can prepare for race day and respect the role that rules play in our sport. With race directors who sanction with USA Triathlon, they're required to enforce the competitive rules, and it's the race director's responsibility to ensure that the rules are enforced at their event and promote a fair race. Officials operate in a supporting capacity. Officials are trained in the application of the competitive rules, provide a consistent interpretation and enforcement of the rules, and when this shared responsibility and commitment is embraced by all the parties, the result is a great race enjoyed by all our customers. And it establishes an environment that encourages fair play and observance of our rules. So what value do officials offer? Well, requesting USAT officials allows the race director to focus on creating a safe and fun event and gives the later responsibility for rules knowledge and enforcement to trained USAT officials. Triathletes are paying customers of the event organizer, and they're entitled to courtesy and respect, and that includes the most difficult situations they may run into. So the focus of officials' effort is really positive, it's not punitive. And the education of the athletes prior to the competition is a high priority for officials. The officials will educate athletes about the rules, they'll work to resolve rules violations prior to competition, and they'll ensure that the rules are observed during competition. And they'll decide upon any matters which arise during the competition and for which there's nothing specific in the rules, because officiating is an art and a science. The rules we have can't cover every scenario, and not all rules are black and white. There are gray areas which require interpretation. Our officials will make hundreds of decisions determining when a violation occurs and determining the correct penalty. And as the artist, the official will take that gray area and paint it decisively. And in doing so, the official can fulfill the responsibility of the federation and sanction event to the athletes, which is an invaluable resource to race directors and athletes. A certain level of officiating is required for any organized race to ensure fairness of competition. Although RDs are encouraged to utilize USAT officials whenever possible, we also understand there are some costs involved that could present an obstacle for some events. Whether or not USAT officials are present, every sanctioned event is required to ensure that the USAT competitive rules are enforced. So race directors have the option to self-enforce or to request that USAT provide USAT officials to handle all interpretation and enforcement of the rules. Every race needs a head official. That's a designated person with the authority to make decisions that can impact the outcome of the race. Race directors should consider how these duties will be carried out at their event and by who, whether that be certified officials or otherwise. Race directors can request USAT officials by checking the USAT officials are requested for this race checkbox in the race information portion on the sanction application. If you don't want officials, then you just don't check that box. The best solution is to request the presence of a USAT official at the event, but all race directors should consider what is best for their event based upon the event, size of field, availability of motorcycles, and budget. As race directors and officials, we provide a service to our athletes, and working together, we can produce events of the highest quality, combining great venues, safety, competition, and fairness. One of the toughest parts of being an RD is being responsible for policing your own event. As an RD, you're very busy with many other aspects of the race. By checking the box and requesting officials, you can take one big responsibility off your list. But should you wish to take on that responsibility, you are required to appoint someone as your head official and provide whoever that person is the training and resources needed to enforce the competitive rules. When you request officials, the officials will work efficiently on behalf of the athletes and the race director. The USAT officials are facilitators. Again, the rules don't deal with every possibility, so when there's an unclear situation, it can't be forced into fitting into an existing rule. It does have a level of judgment. So when a race director chooses the responsibility of self-officiating, they do assume all the responsibilities of the officials. And as you can see in the slide, that puts a lot more tasks on the RD's already full plate. So what happens when you check the box requesting officials for your event? When Event Services receives a sanction where officials have been requested, they will notify the respective Regional Officials Coordinator, or as we call the ROC, and the ROC will coordinate the assignment of officials. There are many factors in determining the necessary number of officials needed, and that could be the course layout, participant numbers, the event type. All of that can impact the number of officials needed. USAT works to support each event that requests the presence of trained officials, and it's suggested that the race director consult with Event Services or the ROC for direction and assistance anytime that you need officials, even if it's a lack of resources or you're curious about self-officiating. Always reach out to Event Services because your Regional Officials Coordinator is also your officiating contact in your region. So once a head official is assigned to your event, the head official will reach out to the race director no less than 3 weeks prior to an event to coordinate the logistics and resources, and that's if the sanction has been received in enough time to give that 3-week lead time. So now that USAT officials have been requested and assigned, what is it that the race director must provide to the officiating team? So the first question will be from the head official will be about motorcycles. So officials observe the bike course as passengers on the back of motorcycles. And only 2-wheeled motorcycles are allowed. There's no trikes. And the drivers that are taking officials around on the course must wear a motorcycle helmet, and that's irregardless of the state law on motorcycle helmets. In the transition area, the race director is responsible for providing a supply of bar end plugs and volunteers. Officials are allowed to inspect equipment, but they're not allowed to repair or move any of the athlete's equipment. But volunteers can assist by replacing the missing bar ends or moving gear or moving bikes if they're racked in the wrong area. An opportunity for the head official to address participants at a pre-race rules briefing. And this varies with event. It can be the day before. It can be on the beach prior to the swim start. But education really is a fundamental area of emphasis for compliance. Communication to the athlete is critical, and it establishes an environment that encourages fair play and observance of the rules. You'll also want to find a time between you and the head official to agree upon what time the penalty should be reported to the timer so the timer has enough time to process those before awards. And also inform the timer or provide the timer's information to the head official so that they can relay this. And that's that all penalties assessed by the head official must be applied prior to awards and included in the final results. And additionally, there can be no adjustment to results outside of the addition of a penalty time. If you happen to have a rules amendment in place at your event, the head official would need to see that in event. So if you do want to request a rules amendment or an addition, all you have to do actually is send that request in with event services during the sanction review process. If it's approved, the dispensation must be posted on your website so all the athletes are aware of the adjustment, and then presented to the head official for the event. The head official cannot enforce a rule differently or apply a different penalty than what is written in the competitive rules without this approved rules amendment. So the officials come with some expenses. So each official receives a stipend. If it's a short distance race, like a sprint or international distance, it's $90 per official, and the head official, and only the head official, receives an additional $75 stipend. If it's a long distance or ultra distance event, then the officials receive $150, and again, the head official only would receive $75 on top of that. It's also reimbursed for mileage, which is per mile, per referee, and that's always based on the current IRS rate, and that's round trip from their home to the event. And lodging, if needed. Typically, lodging isn't requested unless an official lives more than 50 miles away, and that's 50 miles one way, not round trip. And being supportive of the head official's decisions. We have a saying in our program: the event belongs to the RD, and the rules belong to the officials. Any decision made by the head official is final and cannot be overturned by a race director. If athletes receive a penalty, they do have the right to discuss it with the head official, who will post the list of penalties in the results area prior to the award ceremony, and they will be available for questions prior to the award. So if an athlete did come to you and want to overturn a penalty or had a question about it, this is one of those times when you have the head official there from USAT and you can just send the athlete over there for them to deal with. And most importantly, what we really like if you have officials is to provide us with feedback after the event. And you can do that using the evaluation form provided by Event Services, but you can also communicate that with your regional officials coordinator or myself. We're always looking for feedback about what went well, what didn't go well, and that's not only with the officiating team, but maybe officiating in general. And a note in regards to elite rules events. So if an event is providing $5,000 or more in prize money, then elite rules are initiated and officials are required for those events. There are also a few more processes which must be followed by the officiating team, but that would be discussed well in advance with the head official and the race director. So what is it the officials will do for you at the event? Well, pre-race, the head official will work with the race director in advance and ensure everything's in place. So that would be the motorcycles, the bar ends, a time for the pre-race rules briefing and whatnot. And the head official will also review the event sanction. They'll review the event website. They'll provide a cost estimate of the officiating team. They'll also discuss with you if you have any areas of concern on the course, if there's an area of the course that you feel like is a little tight and you don't want to have officials going down there on motorcycles, and that could be a neutral part, but that's something you can discuss with the head official ahead of time so they can prepare for that. So race day before the race starts, officials will report to the transition area prior to transition opening, and they'll get organized for the day. The head official will take the water temperature and determine if the event is wetsuit legal or not. The officials will work in the transition area. They'll inspect equipment and the racking. They'll offer advice to participants on preventing violations and give them education about the rules, any questions that they have. And then hopefully the head official will be able to give a quick pre-race rules briefing to provide what is expected from the athletes and what they can expect from the officials. And again, this allows for a more proactive environment. So once the race starts, the head official or whoever they've designated will watch the swim start. The bike course officials will stage and disperse onto the course to observe behavior. They'll identify violations while observing and/or timing athletes' actions. Officials can also communicate accidents if they come across one out on the course. Now, effectiveness of enforcement depends greatly on the level of competition, consideration of the course, and available resources, which may result in an inability to enforce some of the race. Officials do their best, but it can be a challenge, especially if there's only one official at a small event. It's really difficult for them to get out on the bike course and the run course and bring everything back and have it reported before the award ceremony. So prior to the award ceremony, at a designated time, the officiating team will meet and debrief. The assistant officials are actually supportive and strictly observe and document violations. They actually have no authority to apply penalties. Only the head official can apply penalties. So the assistant officials will report observations to the head official, who will review them, advocate for the athlete, and make sure that the determination is proper. And if so, they'll assess a penalty. After that debrief, the head official will complete a penalty report and submit that to the timer to apply to the results and before the award ceremony. The head official will then post that penalty report in the results area and be available to answer any questions prior to the award ceremony, and they'll also remain there through the award ceremony. The head official will also be available for inquiries about penalties or officiating after the event. And again, this was an overview, but there are a lot more details that probably go into each segment of the course for officials. And it's something that they'll go over with you depending, sometimes the race director will say, I really want a focus on the run course and things like that. So we'll work with you on that. And it's something that it might require another official, but this is all stuff that you can do prior to the event on the pre-race day. So we talked a lot about what the race director has to provide for resources, but I wanted to talk some about the opportunities that USAT and our officials program can do to help. So the sport of triathlon is somewhat unusual in the fact that we can use volunteers in the position of marshals who are empowered to report rules infractions. So if you request a USAT official as your head official, they can deputize and train volunteers to serve as marshals for rules enforcement, either in the transition area or the run course. So for instance, if you had volunteers working at an aid station on the run course, you could have them work as marshals as well, have the head official work with them prior to the event about what they're looking for, what they need to document, and then you could have some coverage out on the run course if you maybe could only afford to have one official come. There's still a way that we can get enforcement throughout the course. And again, this works because the head official is the only person who actually assesses penalties, and it's the trained official's judgment that will be relied upon for fairness. A new role that we put into our program in 2019 was a rules ambassador's role. And it's a volunteer representative and they're spokespersons for the National Officials Program. So their primary responsibility is to educate our constituents about the USAT competitive rules and to promote the USA Triathlon National Officials Program. And this role and assignments are independent of officiating assignments. It's supportive and there's opportunities for them to attend tri meetings, attend venues for maybe packet pickup to answer questions. If you have a beginner's tri meeting and you want to bring in someone to talk about the rules, they'd be happy to attend the event. If you have a beginner event and you just want somebody on site to be able to answer rules, they're a great resource for that. If you want someone to come onto your event Facebook page prior to the event, maybe 2 weeks before the event, and have them post questions and have somebody answer it, that's something we could set up with you as well. And volunteers, we talked about how volunteers can be race marshals, but something else that we're working on is actually creating some videos that your volunteers, especially in the transition areas, can watch and understand what officials are looking for. Any education that we can put out there is great. And this not only helps your volunteers help the athletes have a better experience and comply with the rules if officials are or not there, but also helps them if officials are there and knowing what they're looking for. So for instance, the bar ends and checking those as they come into transition helps the officials get through the transition area faster. And additional resources for race directors, we have a lot of things available on the race director toolbox. We have the most commonly violated rules. There's a message from the head referee. There's guidelines for motorcycles for officials, and we'll also be adding a new form which will actually show the types of motorcycles that can be used for officiating, because we actually have a document that has pictures about the types of motorcycles that can be used, and it's been very helpful for some of the race directors. So we're going to add that to the toolbox as well. And we also have a rules enforcement guide. Additionally, again, your ROC is your regional officiating resource, so don't hesitate to reach out to your ROC or myself anytime with regards to officiating. So the role of USAT officials really is integral to the success of events and the growth of our sport. Officials help to create a positive race experience for all our competitors by creating an atmosphere of sportsmanship, equality, and fair play. And as a race director, you have a unique opportunity to help support and grow the officials program. One way is to request USAT certified officials at your event. Officials work with the RD again to ensure a smooth execution of the event, ensure the integrity of the event, and promote fairness. Officials need experience, which means working events, and that means your events. There's not a lot of consistencies of rules and enforcement from race to race in our sport. And unfortunately, inconsistency of enforcement at events diminishes and erodes the authority of the official and respect for the rules of our sport. When athletes are uncertain regarding the scope of their responsibility or the behaviors that they have to follow and what the consequences are, it negatively influences the athlete's satisfaction, not only at the event, but as part of our sport. You could also help recruit officials or even consider hosting an officials clinic at your event. And this is a service to our sport, and it benefits the race director, the athletes, and it pays it forward a little. So when you host an officials clinic, you actually only have to pay for the head official. So at a clinic, you may have 1 or 2 or 3 officials that are at no cost. And they serve in a probationary period. So after a clinic, those officials will serve in a probationary period for 2 more events. So if you have multiple events within the region, you could benefit not only from hosting the clinic, but the subsequent probationary assignments. And that also would help support other events in your region as well. The goal is to recruit more officials so that we can provide a cost benefit with local officials, but also more officials so we can accommodate new event requests. And most of all is promoting sportsmanship and respect for USAT officials. Our officials give up their time to get trained and maintain their training and travel the races, and they do this because they love the sport. And sometimes they may come across as the bad guy because they have to make a call in the interest of safety or fairness. So when you request officials, promoting USAT officials and sharing the benefits of requesting officials for the event and encouraging other race directors to utilize the officials program. So that was my half of it. If there's any questions or if Todd has anything to add.
Hey, Deb, Eric Opdyke, can you hear me?
I can, Eric. How are you?
Good. I just want to say how lucky we are as race directors to have you leading the ship on the officials program, and I want to thank you for all your work over the years and moving the officials program forward in a not just in a sort of status quo, but really trying to improve it. So I applaud you for your professionalism and your listening to us. I know you and I have had obviously some good conversations over the years about you're always welcome to the feedback. So thank you for all you do. My first question is, I know Todd and Andy and those guys probably hate me because I always get on these things and ask tons of questions, but I know one of the things that Rocky, when he came on board with USA Triathlon, talked about breaking down some of the barriers with the rules. And are there any examples of any rules situations that you've been either you've broken down or you've been a little bit more lax with to break down those barriers?
Well, we're actually in the process right now of working on the rules harmonization effort. But what we are looking at doing is actually offering a relaxed rules environment for new events in particular, because we do want people to get exposed to what officials do and the rules of our sport, but maybe not have a negative experience from it, especially if it's a beginner's event and maybe it's participatory only. And some of the things that we're talking about is actually having officials come to the event and perform their duties as they typically would, except they wouldn't apply the penalty to results. It would be an educational opportunity. So whoever receives the penalty would come and just talk to the official and say, well, what did I do out there that flagged you that I've done something wrong? And what rule did I break? And what do I have to do next time so that I don't violate a rule? And really make it an educational opportunity. But we are definitely looking at not only our rules, but the types of events and what rules would pertain to those types of events. So it's sort of like a level of rules enforcement, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, in the perfect example, I guess, is, whether it's a new event or event that's been around for 10 years, right? It's really more catered towards the new triathlete. And the idea is the person's doing their first race. They want to do it with their friend or their family members, and they're in the back of the pack, right? So for them, it's a point of maybe they've never swam in the open water, which happens all the time, or maybe they've never, been on an open road on a bike course like we may have. And so they want to have this, sense of comfort or safety, right? And so I think that's, where, look, I know that, all the officials I always work with, they're really relaxed. So I'm not going to say that this isn't the case, but I'd really love to see this continuing effort to, make sure our first timers have a good experience. So if they are riding side by side in a safe manner, just because, or they are, 2 bike lengths apart, yes, let's keep that as a learning experience, educate them, but not give them penalties. And I think that's basically what you were saying.
Exactly. Yes, just the opportunity to learn so that when they do move up the ranks, because we also don't want them to start off at a beginner event and then eventually get to an area where they're hitting the podium and it's the first time they're learning the rules. So we're definitely trying to find that balance of how do we introduce you into the sport, introduce you to the rules, but also educate you so that when you do move up to that level, you are aware that there could be officials there and rules would be enforced and what those rules will be.
And Deb, my next question, I'm sorry, is we as race directors get, people, instead of going and trying to find the answer themselves, right? They're going to ask the race director because the race director knows everything, right? Which is obviously not the case. But we, so they're like, hey, so I've got this, it could be anything, right? I've got Raynaud's disease. I've got diabetes, and I need to have my phone is used as my device that monitors my blood sugar. I mean, there's all kinds of situations, right, that are one-offs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're asking us about the rules and this and that, and yes, it would behoove us all as race directors to know as much as we possibly can in the rules to answer those questions and not have to delay an answer and oh, let me ask Deb, or let me ask my head official, or let me send an email into the office and maybe wait 24 to 48 hours to get the answer back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there does seem to be like this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my sort of general answer is, yes, just make sure, when you're in transition, you find one of the officials and you clear it with them so they know ahead of time, right? Instead of after the
Mm-hmm.
fact. And
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, and on that, to that same point, actually, we I don't know if anyone has seen it yet, but we actually updated our officials page on the USA Triathlon webpage, and there's an FAQ out there. And some of the questions that you're asking about, oddly enough, some of those answers are there, which now that we're talking, I think we can put it into a document for race directors for some of the most commonly asked questions and not so common questions, but they're very common maybe to me. So for instance, can I use trekking poles? Can I use a power breather? All of these things that I've been documenting those questions as I've been in this role and putting it out on this FAQ, but it's definitely a document that we could put out on the race director's toolbox as some of the questions that have come up that seem a little odd that we can give you the answer to so that you can go and refer to that. And it's something we could, keep maintaining. But I think that's a great idea to put that out there. And I can definitely do that.
Hey, this is Christine. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, Christine.
Yeah.
Hey. I had a thought. I mean, probably like Eric, I sort of see this from all of the possible different angles. And from the club point of view, I can't tell you how many people I know that are in their third or fourth or fifth year triathlon and really don't understand that drafting is more than just riding behind someone, like from a rule perspective. So there's a real lack of understanding. And I thought,
yeah,
I know USAT doesn't really do a lot of discounting, but just like we get race credits for doing attending these webinars, I wonder if it would be worth exploring to have kind of a rules webinar that regular members can take, and once they've viewed it and get like $5 off, or I don't know, some kind of little perk. I can't answer that right now.
That's an interesting idea.
But I do know that.
Yeah,
I
like that idea.
I do know that people respond more to examples. Like when I talk to them about drafting, and when I say, well, you need to be X number of meters behind the back tire or the front, they respond more when you show them an example, or when you can say, look, you have to pay, when you pass someone, you have to pass someone. So when you make that decision that you're going to try to pass, you have to follow through. If you don't follow through and you have to kind of give up halfway, that could be a penalty for you. And they go, oh. And then I say, because you're hindering the rider that's riding to your right. You're preventing them from executing their race. And there may be people behind you who are also trying to pass who can't figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And then they go, oh, okay. They understand that their behavior has an effect on the people behind them and the people in front of them. You know, it's not an arbitrary rule that's out there to catch you. It has a basis in safety and in fairness.
And it's funny, we've talked about this even on the official side of the program. And so we've talked about, in particular, the bike position rules. We can talk to people for an hour and still have some confusion. But if we were to make a video, even if it was 3 minutes, that helps a lot. And something else, we actually have a rules education working group in the officials program. And to date, we've come up with about 30 scenarios about this is the rule, this is how the rule applies in these scenarios. And once that's complete, it's not going to stay just within the officials program. We're actually going to share that out on our officiating page. So we're hoping that that's going to be another extra level of education. So, and that was one of the reasons we redid our officiating page. It just didn't seem like we had enough information about the officials, because we all talk about officials after something's happened, but we don't talk as much about things before they happen. So that's definitely my biggest focus, is trying to get that education out there. Even the rules ambassadors, we've had some make some videos. And so we're really looking to put stuff out on social media next year, put stuff out on our page, and have more sort of interactive and examples, and say, here's a picture. This is what the officials saw, and maybe what you've seen, and hoping that that can give people another way to look at the rules other than just reading a paragraph.
Totally. I actually proposed some articles to Stephen for USAT magazine that sort of takes a deep dive into some of the most common rules violations. I think that'd be a nice addition to the magazine.
I think it would be great to have some rules information in there, at least get those questions out there, because the more questions that we get, the more answers that we can have too. Yeah. Anything that someone asks that's confusing, we can put those kind of explanations out on our page. And for officials, anytime we get that sort of feedback, that's one of those times where we go back and look at the rule and say, how is it that was taken that way? For instance, one of the things we've talked about is, as officials, we have special enforcement procedures for certain rules. And I think that has caused a big disconnect between officials and athletes more than anything. Is if we penalize them for something and then we tell them to go refer to the rule, they refer to the rule and they say, oh yeah, I looked at the rule. I'm not understanding how you got this from that. And part of it's because we have this special enforcement procedure that isn't out there. So another part of this rules education working group is sort of working on a little bit of an addendum to each rule to say, this is what the rule says. This is how officials interpret and enforce the rule. Because the interpretation is where I think the disconnect happens more than just the wording of the rule. But again, any time that we can find an area where, if it's adding a word to a rule, if it's adding an item to the rule, if it makes more sense and people have a better understanding of it, it's something that I think that we should always look into doing.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Hey, Deb, do you see a value in having a Facebook group just for USAT officials? Or not just for USAT officials, but anybody who wants to ask an official's question?
Yeah, we've talked about maybe, having an officials page, and we tried it a little bit with the rules ambassadors. Now, I don't think it didn't go out officially on the USA Triathlon page, but I think it's time. We're definitely living a different time, and that's where people are going to go and post things. And I also think it's a place where people can go and find past postings and look, what was posted about this previously. So I definitely think for 2020, it's something that will add. I know I'm willing to do it.
Cool.
Well, great.
My last plug is going to be for Deb to come to Rev 3 Williamsburg and Rev 3 New England. So, and then I'm done.
I'll look at my schedule. Todd heard me about that.
I wish I could come, Eric. I'm crewing Race Across America this year, so I can't come.
All right.
I'll be driving.
The only thing I'd like to add is Deb mentioned volunteer videos. We've actually created several volunteer videos already that are on our website under race directors and under videos. So it goes over transition area, aid stations. We're going to have one on course marshals here very shortly. So a lot of the topics she covered already, we're going to have for videos for volunteers that you can distribute to your volunteers.
Oh,
So
great.
thank you so much, Deb,
Check that out.
and
Thanks,
for
Deb.
everyone being on this call. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too.